Hi and welcome to another video on UiPath with me, Jeppe. In this one we're going to revisit the Action Center, and it's been over a year since I did the last two videos on the Action Center, so I thought it's time to do another one. In the first two videos we looked at form tasks, and in this one we're looking at external tasks. So let's get to it. So just to do a very quick recap on what is the Action Center. The Action Center is something you use if you have an automation where you need the input from a human. So you have a task and it runs for a while, and then at some point it needs input, and it then creates a task for a human to complete inside of the Action Center. And once the user completes the task, then the automation will resume and presumably complete. And while this is happening, as the illustration shows, other automations can run and run to completion without interruption. And that's a real strength of the Action Center, is that you can pause an individual instance of an automation execution and let others run uninterrupted. So again, in the first video, we looked at how to complete a form action. First, we created the action in Studio, then we ran the automation, completed the action inside of the Action Center, and I even showed you how to run it on a smartphone through the Orchestrator app. I also showed you how to assign tasks to specific users in code, and also how to distinguish between different types of action results. And if you want to see how all of this stuff is done, I suggest you go to the part 1 and part 2 of this video. This is technically part 3, but it's been a while and quite a bit of stuff has happened to the Action Center. But by watching part 1 and 2, you'll get a pretty good idea of what this is all about. Okay, so before we start working, I just want to show you a couple of things. And that's the difference between creating and using a form task and an external task. So with the form task, you have a process. And that process then creates a form task, and the user is assigned to this form task, fills out the form, and the task is completed and returned to the process, and the process can continue. And with the external task, it's almost the same. You have a process, and you create an external task in this case. And you want that external task to be completed and returned to your process so the process can finish. But as opposed to the form task, you don't have this form that the user can fill out. You need something else to complete the task. And what is that something else? Well, in essence, you have 3 ways of completing an external task. There might be more ways, but in this video, we'll stick to the 3. And the first one is you do it manually. You can just go into Action Center and you can say, okay, I completed this task. Let the automation continue. And I'll show you that in just a few minutes. Another way of doing it is by using an automation to complete the task. And I'll show you that as well. UiPath Studio includes activities for completing tasks, so I'll build a quick automation that shows you how to do that. And then finally, you can use the Orchestrator API to complete the task. As you may know, Orchestrator exposes quite an extensive API for manipulating all kinds of data and retrieving all kinds of data. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video because it's a little bit more involved, but if you'd like me to do it, please leave a comment and I'll consider making a video about this. First of all, I have a virtual machine running in this window, and that is my unattended robot machine. And as you can see, there are no processes assigned to this robot yet, so it can't really do anything, but that'll change in just a few minutes. Then I have a browser open here, and we have 2 tabs open. We have one for my Orchestrator, and you can see that this folder called Automations is completely empty. There are no processes, assets, queues, or triggers. And we also have another tab where we have the Action Center, and we can see here that there are no pending, no unassigned, and no completed actions in the Action Center. So we're starting with a blank slate here, and that's the way it should be. Okay, so we're inside Studio, and I have a blank project here. And the first thing we want to do is we want to go into Manage Packages, click Official, and then type in persist, should be enough. Add the UiPath persistence activities to our project, and save. And this will enable us to use the create task activities inside our project. And once this is done, we just need to do one more thing in order to go on, and that is go to our project settings and enable the supports persistence option here. And now we're ready to start our development. So if we go to our activities and just type in task, we can see that we have a number of task activities here, and we looked at some of those in the first video as well. So instead of creating a form task as we did in the first and second video, we'll create an external task now. So we'll just drag that in And we're not going to do a lot of modifications to this activity. What we're going to do is we're going to, for our automation, we're going to set an argument. And we'll name that in and then task title. And I'll set a default value of testing. And then we'll set the task title here to the value of whatever we send into our automation. The task priority is already set. We're not going to use the task catalog. We could add some task data to the task. We're not going to do that either, but we are going to create a task object to store the task information in. So I just press Ctrl K to create a new variable, and I'll just call it my task object. And what this will do is actually, this will create our task. Now we want it to do one more thing. We want it to wait for this task to complete. So we'll use this wait for external task and resume activity, drag that in, and we'll simply say that the task object that we're waiting for completion on is the my task object that we created up here in the first activity. Now, in order to assign this task to me as a user, I could use the assign task activity. And in order to use that, we need to give it a variable of type list of task user assignments. And I'll just call that my assignments. And when we do that, we can see here in the variables pane that we now have this my assignments variable, which is of type list of task user assignments. So we want to add an assignment to that list so that the task is actually assigned to me. And we will use the add to collection activity to do that. We'll drag that in. And in order to add to the collection, we will instantiate it right away by creating a new list of task user assignments. There we go. And now we can add to that collection up here. So the collection we want to add to, let me just adjust this a little bit, is the my assignments collection. The type of object is a task user assignment. And the item that we want to add, I'll just open the editor here, is a new task user assignment that takes two arguments. And the first one is the task ID. We have the my task object up here, and that is the ID that we want to provide. And then we want to provide the email address of the user, and that would be my email address. And I'll click OK. So now we are creating an external task. We are assigning that task to me, to my user, and then we are waiting for the task to complete. So if we run this now, we can see that the execution has been suspended, and that's because we have reached this wait for external task and resume activity. That means if I minimize my studio and instead go into Orchestrator and refresh my Action Center here, we can see that there is now a task waiting for me to complete it called testing. And I could now complete this task and then press resume inside my studio, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to delete this task, so that we again have an empty Action Center. Then go into Studio, stop the automation, and then I'm going to publish my automation to Orchestrator. And I'm just going to run through this very quickly, just publish it. And now if I minimize Studio again, and even minimize my browser, and then show the machine up here, we can see if we do a refresh on this, well, we don't see anything. That's because inside Orchestrator, of course, we need to create the process. So inside our automation folder, we don't have any automations yet, but we do in our tenant have a package that we just published, this external tasks project that we published just a few seconds ago. So if we go into automations, the folder, and go into the automations tab, add a new process, select the package that we just installed or published, select next, next, and create. Then now we have a process in here, and hopefully if we go to our virtual machine now and do a refresh, we can see the external task automation. So far so good. Now what we can do now then is we can go into Orchestrator and we can say, okay, we're going to run this a couple of times. So just to confirm, we don't have any jobs in this folder. If I click the Processes tab again and press the Start a Job button, the only thing we want to modify right now is the arguments, because this in task title argument, we want to create two different versions of that. So in the first one, we'll simply type in manual task, save it, and run it. And now if we go to the Jobs tab, we can see that there's a job running, and that should become suspended in just a few seconds, because there you go, it's suspended. And if we go to the virtual machine, we can see that this was run, well, it says half a minute ago. That's not really true, but it has been run. So what's left for us to do in this sort of manual execution or manual completion of a task? Well, if we go back to the browser and go to the Action Center, we can now see, if we refresh our page, we can see that there's a manual task waiting here. And that's the title that we gave it. So if I minimize my browser just a little bit or reduce the size of it, right, so that we can see our robot machine here in the background. If I now click here, we can complete the task, or we can actually just click up here on this little check mark. But if I click right here, this means that the task will be completed. Now, what was the task that we needed to complete? We don't know that. It's an external task. We could have sent a message to someone saying, you need to go into this and that system and make these changes. And once you've done that, you can go into Action Center and indicate that you've completed the task, but not until you've done that. So in this example, we pretend that we just performed some task that's very important. And now we click the complete option here. And once I do that, you should see up in the virtual machine that the task will resume and run again. And there we see it starts running and it completes in just a few seconds. And that's it. And now if we go to the completed tab of our Action Center, we can see that the manual task was completed 2 minutes ago. Again, I just completed it. I don't know why it says 2 minutes, but that's how it is. So that was the manual version of this task. So let's go back to Orchestrator. I'll just maximize my browser, go back to Orchestrator, go back to Processes, and then start a new job. And again, I'll go into Arguments, and this time I will edit it again, but this time instead of typing manual task, I will type in automation task. I'll save it, I'll run it, resize it, and we can see if, maybe not. Yeah, we can see that the process just ran and finished. So again, if we go into the pending tasks of our Action Center, and by the way, it's in the pending tasks because it has been assigned to me. If it wasn't assigned to me, it would simply be in the unassigned tab here. So in the pending task, we now have an automation task with an automation ID, and I'm just going to copy this ID real quick, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to build a small automation that will complete this task. So we go back into Studio, and we will add a sequence to our automation here. We'll just call it complete task. And if we search for task activities in our toolbox again, we can see that there's an option to complete a task. And what you know, one of the properties that you need to set on this complete task activity is the task ID. So I paste in what we have from the task in Action Center. And the task action value here can be anything. We'll just say we're done. That can be anything really. And also you can include some data for the task. But that's it. Now, if I debug this file now, and I'll do that in just a second, we should see our task up here resume again. So let's try and do it. I complete the task, and now we should see that the automation starts up, runs, and is completed. Again, if we go into Action Center, we can now see that the pending task, if I do a refresh, is gone. And if I go to the completed task, we can see that now we have both the manual and the automation task completed. I'm a big fan of form tasks, but I can definitely see a big potential when using these external tasks as well, because you can do some very, very advanced, collaborations really between systems if you use the Orchestrator API to complete the tasks. And I'm not going to make any promises, but I think I'll do a video on that. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you like this video, give it a like, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe.